So welcome. We're going to talk about about SDB, also known as the Simple Database. My name is Joseph Hall. I wrote it, so blame me. This is Daniel Wallace. He's also a senior engineer at SaltStack, and he's done a bit of work with SDB as well. So I'm going to have him driving today. So first off, who here has used SDB? Awesome. 1, 2 people, right? So it's very popular already. Let me tell you why. So SDB has been around for like 2 years now. Do you guys know that? Those of you that do, raise your hand if you do know. And why didn't you start using it? Did you look at the docs?
There were docs. I didn't say anything.
There were docs. There were docs about how to write SDB modules, just not use them.
Docs said not to use it in production or explain what they were.
They said not to use it in production? Yeah.
That's a pretty good idea.
Do they still say that? They should probably be fixed if they do. People are using it in production. Not a whole lot of people. It's actually a very, very powerful concept, but it's not very well known. Problem one, the docs sucked. They're better now. Problem two, it just didn't really get advertised. You know, we haven't talked about it at SaltConf before, even though it was around for the last 2 SaltConfs. And in fact, we just decided a couple weeks ago to start to talk about it. Originally, Daniel and I were going to talk about Salt Cloud, but there were like 50 million other Salt Cloud talks, so we decided to move to something a little bit less covered. Okay, so SDB. Did you guys know it was Simple Database? Who thought it was Salt Database? Never been Salt Database, but lots of people think it was. Originally, it might have been Secure Database, since the first driver for it was called, what was that? Keyring.
No.
It was for keyring. And then etcd was added, which is somewhat less secure. A Vault driver is in there, and it's improperly done because it was done by a guy that knows nothing about Vault. So if any of you guys know Vault, you should probably be looking at that and not me. Okay, so let's talk about SDB. SDB is a URI type format. So SDB : whack whack something something something, right? The reason that I chose this format is because it needs to be really small and simple and easy to define inside a config file. Because what you're going to do in a config file is you're going to say MySQL password SDB : whack whack, you know, whatever the key is, okay? And we'll talk about what the format looks like. The idea behind this is we no longer have to put passwords inside config files. We can check them to revision control. People aren't going to look at our etc salt master and find stuff easily. But depending on where you put it, there's other complications. If you put it in keyring, then you probably need to run something like GNOME keyring or KDE keyring on the same machine and manually type in the password every time it restarts, and that sucks. But there's use cases for it, right? More likely you're going to be using something like etcd that doesn't have any authentication per se, or maybe something that looks for authentication somewhere else on the computer, something that doesn't have to be configured. Does that make sense? So that's why it's supposed to be small, simple. People have asked me why we don't support huge URLs. I mean, you could make a massive URL, but then you'd have to use it. And that also sucks, right? Configuration is stored somewhere else. We'll get into that. Okay, we talked about that. The data sources. So you guys know that when you put something inside etc salt master or etc salt minion, if you change it, you have to restart, right? Well, if you're using config.get to look at that config value, then as soon as it changes in the SDB source, the next time you read it, it'll be the new value. It does the lookups on the fly. So that also helps out with quite a few things, right? Okay, next slide. So, well, we talked about this.
Yeah.
Okay. So, as simple as possible. Do we have examples on the next slide?
Yeah.
There we go. So SDB : the name of configuration profile / the key to the piece of information you're getting at, And then optionally, well, it's a URL. So question mark, arg1 equals val1, and so on, right? If you have a driver that supports that, then it'll be documented as such. Most of the drivers don't at this point. Most of the drivers are just profile/key. And for most things, that's honestly good enough. If you were to write a MySQL driver, then you could do things like put a query in the configuration profile, template it, and then have people say, username equals this, or inside the URLs, and have it handle that. That's all entirely up to the person that writes the driver. Go back. Oh yeah, complex URLs and YAML. YAML doesn't exactly, it's not known for being the most forgiving parser sometimes, right? If you want things to be really, really parsable, put them in JSON, in proper JSON. But most people are using YAML with Salt. Okay, configuration blocks, we'll look at those in just a moment. They should also be as simple as possible. If it needs to be more complex, do it, but try not to. It needs to be simple. That's really the key thing here. Okay, go ahead. No, go back. Okay, this is going to confuse some people. SDB is only resolved inside of Salt, and only through either the SDB configuration or execution or runner modules, or through config.get. Okay, don't put it inside your formulas unless you're using config.get in your formulas. Does that make sense? Okay. Traditionally, SDB has supported getting and setting values, and honestly, I don't think people use a whole lot of setting values because they're probably just going to do it on their data store anyway. Maybe they have a MySQL database that they're managing through some other platform, and they just want to serve out that one key for this one thing, or that one field for this one thing, and that's all they need, right? About, 3-4 weeks ago, maybe, somebody added delete. So delete is also now supported inside SDB, and none of the drivers have it. But we're going to change that today. So go ahead and move on to the next one. Okay, configuration profiles. Inside the appropriate file, master or minion, you give it a profile name, give it the name of the driver that you're going to be using. That's the only really required line overall. And then configuration lines that are appropriate to that driver. Do you have any examples up? You have an example for Postgres.
An example for Postgres.
Pull up your Postgres one. The Postgres one is brand new, as in you wrote it like last night?
Since yesterday afternoon.
Yesterday afternoon. So I don't think it's even checked in yet. So it's got a few things in there. Because Postgres is a little bit more complex than, say, etcd, right? An etcd driver, or an etcd configuration block, you don't have one, do you?
You have one in here. Oh.
Okay, put one in there? Okay. etcd is simple. You tell it etcd, give it a host, give it a port, you're good to go. Right? Okay, go back. Okay, nothing.
Nope.
We didn't look at here. Go ahead. Okay, getting values. If you put it inside the master config, so, and this may sound kind of confusing, you put your configuration blocks for SDB inside the master config, and then you put things that reference that inside the master config. Does that sound confusing? How would it resolve that, right? That's because it's resolved with config.get later on. Okay? So inside either master or minion config, this was actually written for Salt Cloud, and ironically, Salt Cloud was the last thing to have it. So inside etc Salt Cloud, providers.d, profiles.d, inside any of those files, you can also make references to SDB. And that's really, really useful for authentication to cloud providers, right? Inside SLS files, using config.get, talked about that. The runner module, I didn't add the runner module. Seth House added that like a year after I put in SDB. And it works exactly the same. SDB.get. Execution module. Okay, go to the next one. Let's start driving.
Okay.
These pretty simple guys from either execution or runner modules, stb.get. This may sound kind of confusing. You do have to use the entire URI for the thing that you're doing. You don't just say stb.get profile equals this and key equal. No, just use the URL the way you normally would. Okay? It'll resolve exactly the same way as everywhere else. Setting is exactly the same, but you give it the value that you're going to set it as. Right? Not everything supports set. Everything supports get. There's no point otherwise, right? Not everything supports set. Most things do. Delete, again, nothing supports it. Do you want to pull up the code for etcd? Okay, doing some code diving here. You see there's not a whole lot going on. These look familiar? Who here has spent time in execution modules? Raise your hand, Ryan. Okay, it looks pretty much the same. We've got a func alias at the top, we've got set, we've got get. I've got a get com because I use that a lot. So let's go ahead and copy over get. Copy that to a new function. Change it to delete. Okay. Go down. Change that to client.delete.
Do what?
Client.delete.
Client.delete.
And we're not going to return the result value because it's not there anymore. So maybe wrap it in a try except block and return true if it's good and false if it's not. It's not that complicated to add these things in, right? This could be a pull request that we put in by the end of the discussion. Okay, let's look at the slides again. Okay, we've got some example usage. If you guys are looking at the source tree, you may notice there's no SFTP/FS driver for etcd right now, or for SDB right now. If you look at that new SALT book that just came out, you'll find that driver. Please don't commit it upstream. It's copyrighted, but feel free to commit one that's clearly not the same. Okay, you guys know what book I'm talking about? There's a book out called Extending SaltStack. Okay, code examples are on PAC's website if you want to go take a look at them. Anyone can look at it without buying the book. Anyway, so why do I have a file server backend in there?
That's what you're using SFTP for. You're just configuring SFTP with it.
Okay, it's been a month or so since I've looked at the SDB module for SFTP, but that's probably the configuration for it. When you set up SFTP FS, those are the things you set up for it. Oh, I see what I'm doing.
As a file server backend.
Okay, as a file server backend, not as SDB. This is what happens when you have back-to-back presentations. You don't have time to review your second set of slides. So, okay, our username we're getting out of myetcd, password we're getting out of myetcd, okay. And I just look like an idiot now. It's not new. Okay, go ahead. Okay, let's take a look at the source tree, see what kind of other modules are there. We've already looked inside etcd. We know how simple that is. Let's look inside. You want to do your Postgres one?
I do my Postgres one.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Can I be heard?
You know what?
Maybe.
Before you do the Postgres one, let's look at one of the simple ones.
Yes.
Let's look at like SQLite 3. That's probably not complex. Does that look complicated? Who here has worked with SQLite 3 in Python? Does that look familiar? Yeah, I mean, the get block retrieves a key and returns it. The set block does an update and sets it. Delete deletes the key. SDB modules are some of the easiest modules in the world to write for Salt. What?
You used format. You told me I had to use Jinja. It's not format.
Yeah, you should use Jinja though.
Okay.
Anyway.
That's why mine's more complicated.
Okay, let's take a look at the structure. Go back into the etc. No, this one's fine. You'll notice that the set function, we give it a key. That's the obvious thing that we're going to look at. We give the value that we're going to set it to. And the profile is optionally a configuration profile that you pass in. I don't think I ended up using that.
You can use the profile in order to, so you don't have to set it in the SaltMaster minion.
Oh, pass through a dictionary directly. Yes. Okay. Pass through. Have you done that?
Yep.
Do you have an example you can show?
No.
Okay. Awesome.
It was in a Docker container that's way gone.
Okay, so look at get. It asks for a key, right? Take a look at the execution module for this too. Okay. Is that complicated or what?
The worst.
Yeah. Okay, back out of here. Let's go ahead and take a look at your Postgres one. You want to talk about it?
I can.
Go ahead and talk about it.
All right. So it's basically the same thing. It just uses a couple extra things to make.
Microphone.
It's basically the same thing. It uses a couple extra things to allow you to extend more into what you can do inside of Postgres. It has default set so that I have to clean this up, but the default is you'll basically be doing your regular SQL queries against it and getting entries back, single entries back, the same way that the rest is working. And then set and delete work the same way. And then down at the bottom, it's just passing in whatever needs to be set, so that you just pass in your multiple args after the URI args after everything, and then that's used for what's queried or what's set for deleting and getting.
Do you want to show us a sample profile for this?
Yeah, this one.
There he is.
So I wanted to use this to make it so that I could simplify my cloud profile. And so I was using and I also wanted to play with JSON today. So I made it so that I could query against the JSON VH store and can store my entire profile for cloud in one SDB key.
You notice too how his return value is a full-on dict. That's based on the query that he sent in. The query is designed to return a dictionary. You could set your query to return a single value. This would be especially useful in a Jinja template because you could populate a dictionary inside there and then start pulling stuff out. One single call for lots of values, right?
Yep.
But go ahead.
That's all I had.
That's all you have.
Yeah, it's simple. I did it since I spent about an hour yesterday and then an hour today.
Okay. Let's go back to slides, see what we have next.
I think we're all done.
Are we?
Questions, answers.
That was really short.
Yeah.
So, guys, let's get some questions. SDB, it's not really new, but it's really unknown. Hopefully we've given you enough information to be dangerous with your questions. So let's ask some questions that'll embarrass me. Ryan.
How does this differ at all from external pillars?
How does it differ from external pillars? You can use them on the master, which doesn't have pillars, or grains. You can use them inside SaltCloud, which at the moment doesn't support pillars, but there's been a lot of discussion of it. Have you seen the discussion on that too? People have talked about it, it's not there yet. Yeah, that's about where I'd put it. Tom?
So what I understand is the minion side, so the minions need access to whatever database you're talking to.
It
Yes.
can happen on minion or master.
Whatever device is going to be processing the SDB has to have access to the source of truth.
Right. I want to point out something about security here. And this is something that people have asked several times, and we've explained it, and they said, oh yeah, that makes sense. So we have needs sometimes for the minion to connect to things that, with parameters that need to be hidden. That shouldn't be in the config file, right? Like the MySQL stuff. Has anyone ever set up a MySQL returner? Really? Kinda? Okay. Well, the MySQL returner, consider putting a connection to MySQL on every single one of your minions, including username and password, to that database. You better hope the database is really locked down, right? There's also master-side returners where you can have the master do the work, but you're having the master do the work. So one obvious solution would be to use SDB, put your information inside there, and then have it get it from some source. And you guys are familiar with encryption at rest, right? Some people have looked at this and said, oh, hey, now I can put encrypted data on the minion that only the minion has access to, and the master can't look at it. Wouldn't that be great?
Config.get.
What?
Config.get.
Config.get, yeah. Everything the minion has, the master has, right? This is a reference to, what do they call it in Chef? The data bag, encrypted data bags. That's because Chef handles things a little bit differently, and the security model does actually work for Chef, so I've been told. I'm not a Chef guy. What's that? But in Salt, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because if the minion can return something, the master can get at it. Exceptions to this would be if, first off, we're not allowing root users to run stuff on the master. You know, the master is running as a Salt user. You're having to log in as your own individual users, and those own individual users don't have access to things like config.get. You know, kind of like how when you're setting up your sudo rules, you don't give somebody sudo access to bash or vim, right? So you can kind of get there, functionally get there by tying or locking things down a little bit, but it's a dangerous path. So be careful about the security as far as that's concerned. Okay, anyone else? Yes?
Doesn't this support the POIHP encryption stuff, so you can create little hashes and stuff whenever they be able to...
People have been asking about a GPG renderer for it, and I'm not the guy to write it. But a couple of people have suggested that they would.
But they
I hope they do. I should not be allowed to error encryption. I think I've mentioned this in previous talks too. Yeah, it's possible to do it, same as with the GPG renderer. It's just not been done yet. Okay, anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I'm following your scenario, kind of like chicken and egg syndrome. How do you get the data in there on the minion? You know, you've got a whatever minion you're trying to bring up, and you need this data available to the minion.
So the question is, it's a chicken and egg situation. How does the minion actually get to the data when it's not been defined yet on the minion, right? What you're doing is you're defining how to look up the data when it's time for it to be looked up. So it's not being looked up when you first start up the minion or first start up the master. It's not touching it at all. It doesn't even call a single config.get or anything. But later on, when you need that piece of information, then you call to it, and it'll do the lookup right then. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I still don't see how, because you said in some scenarios there's not a set function.
You can set it if you just go log into MySQL and do your insert into a table.
But that's a manual process.
Sure.
It is. Well, again, most people, I think, that are populating usernames and passwords, they're using some other process, and they just need quick access to it.
Okay.
I think most of them have a set by now, and if they don't, it's not strictly enforced that it's required, but it could be added. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yes.
So it's basically just name value pair.
Name value pair, well, like his return to dictionary, but generally speaking, you're going to want to return name value pairs.
Values could be a dictionary.
Right. Limited use for things like password, right?
Yeah.
Actually, that would be a pretty good password, right? A dictionary of stuff. But yeah, generally speaking, just key value pairs. Yes?
So the use case you presented is like config values for modular things, right? Like returner or
Not
Can you use this with like the config values for the base minion itself? And if so, how does that impact like when other ops gets packed and things like that?
I've never tried it. So the question is, can you use it for base minion options that are required when you start up the minion, right?
As long as it's loaded beforehand, it
Yeah.
should work. As long as it's loaded
I think
before
what you're
the rest
proposing
of it.
is a race condition.
Yeah.
Well, probably,
I'm-
that's why I'm
yeah.
asking, right?
Actually, you know what? I'm going to guess that it won't work. Because Salt is going to load the entire config
Yeah.
dictionary, then start iterating through it.
Would it though? But it would still, it would, as long as
Yep,
it uses
yeah, it might
config
still get
git,
to it.
as long as it uses some form of config git, it would still do, no, because it's going to pull out the object directly by doing a .git out of the dictionary, so it wouldn't
Yeah.
work. It's mostly going to work in stuff that is going to pull the configuration later. Not at startup, no.
Yeah.
Anything that spins off a second process, like,
I'm going to say even if you
Returners and those
got it
things.
working, and I think there's a possibility you could, I wouldn't rely on it. It will break on you sometime.
Don't use it in production.
Don't use it in production.
yeah.
Yes.
So on the SaltStack documentation right now, there's about 5, and then in the Postgres 6. Adding a new SDB module, like if I needed to create something that didn't exist, how easy is that as just like a custom module?
Well, you saw the modules we pulled up here. Pull them up again. Pull up the etcd one.
What path would I?
So inside the source tree, it's going to go in salt SPM.
Okay.
I don't think you can use _ SPM.
You can't. It's not in there.
It's not in there. Okay. So you're going to have to place it directly in the source tree right now.
Would it be possible to put it in the external modules directly?
You could put it in the external modules directory, but you'd have to install it in the external modules directory on everything. Potentially, you could just add a sync _ actually. It is in there. You can do it. Done.
Okay. Sound good? Okay, yes.
What dunders are in there?
What dunders are available? So since it's a loader object, you have access to dunder ops. You have access to dunder salt, don't you? No, we're using
No.
the utils thing.
Yeah.
Do me a favor, open up the loader.py. We'll look. Okay, you have access to other SDB
And that's yeah.
functions, and that's it. Yeah.
So
So,
you could in theory use this to drive a grain mistake.
I'm sorry?
You could in theory use this to create grains.
To create
Grains.
brains?
Yeah. Yes. As long as you do config.git and not grains.git.
Oh, grains. I'm like, brains?
Brains.
Is this? He seems to know about brain. I don't know anything about brains.
You want to run a grain.
Yeah,
I can add that switch over.
you can use it in grains. I don't think you could use it to generate grains though. But inside a grains file, you could put in an SDB URI. Okay? As long as you access it through config.git, because grains.git doesn't have access. It probably wouldn't be that hard to put in, it's just not in there. Config.git is really the thing that people use now because it looks in all the places, right? So, you guys know where config.git looks in order? Pull up config.py. Salt modules config. Were you guys expecting to go code diving today?
Yeah, eventually.
Good.
Okay. So you see the SDB stuff that I added in there? It checks first in dunder ops. And if it's, yeah, dunder ops first, and then grains, and then pillar.
Well, SDB. Next.
Yeah, it checks
Oh,
dunder
yeah.
ops and then does it an SDB
And then-
lookup. And the SDB lookup just checks to see if it's a correct URI and if it can resolve it. And if not, it just returns it wholesale as it is. Okay, and so ops, grains, pillar, and then master ops if they're available. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
So the password that we store on the minions, are they supported by encrypted passwords?
Or plain text.
Okay, so the passwords that you store on minions, are they supported as,
For the Postgres database.
oh, for Postgres? Are they plain text or they're encrypted somewhere?
What do you mean?
How are you
Password
storing
in
your Postgres?
Plain text on the thing right
Plain text in, right now. But again, that driver is less than 24 hours old,
Yeah.
so.
now. It was
there's
like,
plenty
get it
of
up and working before we have to sit in this room and talk.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I see vault. It's up there. It's the vault for the sections towards the encrypted blocking sound. The keys.
It does not. Oh, it does tokens.
Yeah, it does tokens. I can't tell you much about Vault. Here's what happened. A bunch of people asked for it, and finally Tom came to me and said, hey, can you do this? And so I read some Vault docs, and I stood up Vault, and I saw how to hit it over the API, and I put it in there. I asked for comments from the people that were requesting it. Pretty much nobody said anything until 2 weeks later when somebody said, you are totally doing this the wrong way. Why did you merge this? If you guys are going to make feature requests and somebody asks you a question about the feature request, it is in your best interest to watch for it and answer those questions. Yeah, so the framework for Vault is in there. Somebody that's much smarter than Vault than me should go in there and make it more Vaulty. Okay, that's probably the youngest driver too, not counting the Postgres driver.
Or your MySQL driver that's not, also not
My
committed anywhere.
MySQL driver that's halfway finished and has been so for 2 years. Okay, anyone else? Yes,
Environment-based credentials.
environment-based credentials.
Vault does it
Okay,
right there.
yeah, STB doesn't have anything in there for it, but Vault does. Oh,
For credentials for the
environment
STB?
variables. Yes,
Or-
yes.
Yeah.
Because Vault supports it directly, I just added it in there. But yeah, it would depend on the driver. Does that answer your question? I can try to be more specific.
And then more around salt environments.
Salt environments. Okay, that's what I thought you were talking about in the first place. No, there's no specific support for that right now.
It didn't appear to be, I just had to ask.
Yeah. I don't know that it would be
It
that
would be
difficult
easy to
add.
add.
Yeah.
Import os.environ. Get whatever the key is.
No.
For doing what?
Salt-env. Salt-env.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then not yet.
Yeah. It's slightly harder.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know that it's that much harder though.
I wouldn't think
I'll
so.
show you where to look.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm not going to do it.
Well, okay. So Daniel's not going to do it. And I'll have to find where to do it, else I pull it up now and, yeah. Okay. Come talk to me afterwards and we'll go in and find it, okay? Anyone else? Yes,
Yeah, you said something about where I'm not supposed to be using this at the very beginning. What was that again?
where you're not supposed to be using it?
Yeah,
Production? So,
besides production, like some areas within Salt that I'm not
Formulas.
in formulas. Okay.
well, if,
You probably can.
no, you can use them from formulas using config.get because that is supported in formulas. And that's on one of the slides, so I better back it up. You can use it in formulas using that. But I don't think you can refer to like an STB dictionary like you can with, data or grains or pillar and so on.
So
No, I'm sorry, config.get. Just config.get.
So it won't get rendered with like the pillar data or anything like that.
I don't think it will. No. Daniel wrote something for the cloud config files called apply SDB that does do that for cloud configs, and it was just never added into ops for anything else.
He messaged me on IRC one afternoon and said, "Hey, can you write this?" And I said, "Yeah." And then I thought he was using it, and then we found out yesterday he didn't use it at all.
I was using it in Salt Cloud.
Okay.
That's what I needed it for. But it's not in there for anything else, but it's easy enough to make a call out to it. So put in a feature request and we'll grab it. Did I answer your question or are you looking unsatisfied?
Yeah, no, I'm good. It sounds like
Okay.
it sounds like I can use it everywhere.
Awesome.
Hopefully.
And if you can't, let me know. Yell at me, take a number. Okay, yes.
Will this work in, so I have a situation where we have multiple web cache servers, and when you spin them up, the first one that comes up is going to be the primary and the rest is slave off of it.
Right.
So when I spin it up, is this something that I could, within the state, say, the first one that comes up would just put an entry in there that says, hey, I'm the first one. And
You
then
could
all
use
the
set
other
for
ones
that.
Spin up, it would go check that state, and if it was there, then they would slave off of it instead.
Yes, I can see that working. I don't think we have an SDB state, right?
No?
But we have a module state, which can call out to any other execution module. So I would use that to call out to SDB.set.
Do a get first in your Jinja. Make
Do a
sure
get first to
if
make-
nothing's in there,
Do a
then
get first
do a
to make sure it's
set.
not all reset.
But then then you have the race condition of between your get and set, does someone else set?
Lock files. Well, lock variables.
Yeah.
It lessens the race condition.
You have to lock it in the database.
Yeah, the database is really the place to lock it. And
Right,
Memcache doesn't really have any locking.
We
does
should
it?
write a Redis.
You can compare and swaps.
We should do
Okay.
a Redis SDB.
You
So-
want to look at how we do like the generating job ID stuff? Because that's also pluggable. There's like a method that's like giving
Oh,
a
yeah.
job ID thing.
So put a value in there like a JID. It's time stamped and all that. Or are you talking about? I know you don't like JIBs.
No, I don't like it, but just the how it interacts. 'Cause basically, there's a bunch of subsystems that need to do some sort of locking or atomics.
Right.
So something similar to that, where they should do. Basically, just make another method, which is like add instead of set or something. And that way, it'll only work if there's.
Right. So you do an add,
You have to-
which on its own checks to see if it's done.
Right. You just say as the module, this must be atomic. Take it here or something.
Okay, that's good. You get all that? Okay. And Tom, what's your email address for everyone? Okay. Anyone else? Ryan.
Is there any mechanism of doing caching for calls? Like, say, for instance, I make like 50 calls to a key. Is it going to make 50 queries?
Yes, it is.
Is there any way to do caching at all?
Not yet, but about a week ago, I started working on a cache loader. And,
If you finish it.
well, it largely works.
Oh, okay.
It's just
This is new.
also largely untested. I mean, it's really new.
Don't use it in production.
Don't use it in production. No, the expirations on it are not dialed in. Everything else about it works. And so what I would do for that is like do a cache of 5 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever. Put an expiration on it so you know what I mean?
So for,
I mean, because SDB is supposed to be dynamic, look things up on the fly, but you're right, you don't want to do 50 hits for exactly the same value in a row.
well, like state calls, for instance, like context would be the run of like the state run, and that's actually incredibly useful in comparison. So actually, I never want to cache things for an amount of time. Like caching validation sucks, but I
Okay.
do want to. I want to have something cached where you want to look up the entirety of a state run.
So like put it in under context or something.
Right, it looks like context.
So that would work for the apply SDB stuff because it overrides the variable in ops.
Make a context that is per state run thing. It is assuming not using present.
If we ran it over all the low state data,
Well,
once it
you
was
could,
rendered, if you just ran apply SDB on all the low state data, that would render all of your SDB stuff and then cached.
well, what I would do probably is just make the first call, put it inside the context, and then refer to the context.
Packed and stuff.
What's that?
Context wasn't packed in, so.
Okay.
Maybe I should add a.
Well, I was thinking,
Feature request.
when you call the SDB, you're calling for some module, the module should probably be attached.
Salt's not packed in either, right?
What's that? Pack?
Salt is not packed in
No,
either.
what I mean is when you do the access to SDB, it's like, SDB again, it's a thingy, right?
Or
Yeah,
you know,
in my case, I'm thinking of C credentials, this is gonna be really clear. We actually call, we get all the credentials for the entire service, and then we get the individual keys from that. So,
Right, what I was thinking.
Okay,
is
guys,
instead of making it-
I'm going to cut you
Yeah.
off because you're now officially in your own conversation, and I can't repeat it all. because I can't remember it all. Okay, afterwards. Anyone else before Ryan and Tom get back to their conversation? Okay, that's it. Thanks, guys.